Hey, thanks, Kartik. Thanks for coming on my photography podcast. I've been trying to get you on this podcast for quite a long while and finally convinced you to come on this. Right. So, how did your photography journey start? And before that, let's start with an introduction about you and what you do.
Hi, Rajeev. First of all, thank you for inviting me to the podcast. I know we have been trying to do this for a long time, but yeah, finally we are here. So, brief introduction about me. I like to do many things, as they call jack of all trades, master of none. I try to be a master of a few things and jack of a few things because I think life shouldn't be stuck to one particular thing. Life is to explore and to learn new things. And, that's the philosophy that I follow. So my career journey started working with ESPN long ago, where I was a sports journalist and I had interviewed many sports stars, including Wasim Akram, a lot of hockey players in our team, a lot of tennis stars, Leander Pace. So while I was doing it, I did it for about a year, and that was the time when Facebook had started becoming popular, and I was back in Delhi, and I would always see pictures on Facebook of my friends who were doing arts and who were doing theater and who were doing photography, and I would always be like, do I really want to be a journalist? So, and I started realizing, there were some stories when you had to really chase the sports people, even when they are busy, but then you have a deadline. So you are calling them again and again, and they are getting annoyed. And I'm like, we are just trying to annoy people who know what they are doing. And that was not for me. So, that was not organically coming to me. So what had happened is during my graduation, which was mass communication, we had a brief course about photography. And that was the time when I had sort of learned a little bit about very classroom teaching stuff, got introduced to some nice photographers, Ansel Adams, Raghu Rai, and I really for the first time, I sort of started realizing, yes, photography in itself is an art form. It's a storytelling medium. And so there was a college project actually where we had to do a photo essay, and that was the time, and probably mine was the last generation to saw film transitioning onto digital. I mean, film was in the dying stages that time, in the sense that we actually did that photo essay project on a film camera. And that was the first time I had sort of realized, oh, I mean, we have all seen cameras in our houses and, for family gatherings and stuff. But first time, this was a Vivitar film camera. I don't remember the exact name, but it had way more settings than I had had seen in the camera that we had at home. I was like, what is this? And I saw through the viewfinder, and there was a plus sign in red and a minus sign in green. And it basically showed you if the light that is coming is correct. I was like, wow, you can actually control the light that is coming through the viewfinder in the camera. And then I started exploring more. Then we did that photo essay, the story got over. Then I got busy with other things. And, it just remained somewhere in the memory that, I know a little bit about photography and I've learned about it. What I'd also done is during even my journalism days, I would go online and look at pictures and look at good photographers' work. So I developed at least an eye to appreciate good photography. So after ESPN, so that had happened, and then during ESPN, I had realized that this is not for me, and I put in my papers. I was pretty young, very risk averse, so that was not a problem as such. And then I asked my father to sort of help me buy a camera. And at that time, the first camera that I bought was Nikon D60. And I just started going out with a couple of my friends, and we started doing some street photography in old Delhi and all. And as I explored it more, I realized that I have a keen eye for it. So then, I was still not doing it professionally, but just to give you a little bit, since we are on my background, let me tell you that I was also, while I was doing photography, I was equally interested in films and I was equally interested in theater during that time. So I used to do theater in Delhi during my college days, even before ESPN days. So I had a circle of friends who were all planning to go to Bombay and become professional actors. So some of them, they always wanted pictures. They would never have enough money to get a portfolio clicked. And that was a portfolio time when people would spend 40, 50,000 to get a portfolio done. Not everyone had that kind of money. So one of my friend, he asked me that you have a camera, why don't you click some of my photos? So I went around Delhi and, clicked some of his pictures, and pictures came out really well. I learned that, okay, I have something. I think I can shoot these portfolios. And, I had already a circle. And this friend of mine was happy. So he paid me also very minimal amount. But I was like, okay, this might not be a lot of money, but at least for one day's work coming from a friend, it's 1/4 of my salary that I was getting at ESPN. So I was like, if I can do this 20 days in a month, I will be making, 20 times what I was making my salary. So there was a professional angle to it. Then obviously I started, finding more people to shoot with so I could build my profile. And so then I built a decent profile. Then made a Facebook page. I made a website. I started calling myself a photographer. I've done some good projects. I've been published in many magazines. You might have seen some pictures. I've been published in Maxim magazine. I've been published in Curious, which is a very, very reputed design magazine that comes out of India. So, but what had happening is there still was, some kida within me that wanted to explore more and wanted to explore moving images more than the photography. Also, what I'd realized because of this whole digital, let's call it revolution, what had happened is everyone got the access to cameras and they were becoming better and better. And there was a springing of too many photographers that time. And I realized, okay, everyone is calling themselves photographer these days. Then I thought about it more and I was like, would you call yourself a doctor until you have actually, done your medical school? But so how can you just call yourself a photographer when you don't know it in full depth and if you have spent years sort of trying to own those skills? Because what had happened, the cameras had become so much better that, it was sometimes you feel that it was not you, it was the camera that was getting those images. So as I explored it more, I thought, okay, I maybe need to learn a little more than what I know as of now to call myself a professional photographer. During this time, I had moved to Bombay to do my post-graduation. And after my post-graduation got over, I thought, okay, let me assist a photographer. So I started assisting a photographer. His name was Kunal Verma. He was a very talented photographer, very established. He used to assist Atul Kaspekar. So I learned with working with him, what I learned was that, okay, I am not enough at all. I am calling myself photographer. Okay, I get some good comments on my photography on Facebook, but I don't know the nitty-gritties of it. Studio lighting is something you can't learn till you have access to those expensive lights. And so for the first time with him, when I got into a studio for a professional shoot, and I was like, okay, I really need to up my game. And then obviously there is another aspect of it, which is the professional side of it, the business of it, the networking that goes into it. So while I was assisting, I assisted him for good 6 months, on and off. And then after that, my photography definitely became better. I learned much more. And I continued doing photography. And I mean, I still do it once in a while if my friends ask me nicely. But my interest sort of made me take a move to filmmaking. So I had to sort of leave photography somewhere in the background.
Right.
So that was about the photography. Yeah.
Okay. So how did this transition from photography to film happen? Like, when did you make that conscious decision
Okay.
to move away from still images?
Okay. So see, anyway, as I told you, I had an interest in theater. I had an interest in movies. So it was always there. It was never, there was never a definite point that I was like, okay, this is photography and this is, now I'm going to leave it and move into cinematography, because I was always interested in films. So, and writing and stuff like that. So it was always going side by side. And also I had realized by then that, the skills that you learn from photography, they are equally applicable into filmmaking, and you also learn a lot of other, because like in a way, there is a thin line between photography and say filmmaking, because you are still creating visuals, you are still telling the story. So the basic principles are the same of both. So I think the decision where I thought, okay, let me take a break from photography and uh, completely move into filmmaking was happening when I was assisting with this photographer, and I started thinking that, okay, this, even though this is great life, you go into an air conditioned studio and you shoot and you make a lot of money and you get to hang out with really cool people. But I was young, I had a lot in me, lot of energy in me. So I thought, let me not get stuck with it. Let me learn some more. And then maybe in another few years, I can take a call what I want to do professionally. So probably back in 2011, through this photographer, a friend of mine, Kunal, whom I was assisting, I'm really thankful to him actually for a lot of things. He introduced me to a filmmaker. His name was Praval Raman, and Praval, spoke to me and we clicked, then we became good friends. And then Praval told me that, you have a good writing sense and maybe you should try, working with me on one of the films that I'm doing. And I mean, I was waiting for that thing. It didn't come as a surprise, because I was always interested in learning some more and going to a film set and, learning the crafts of filmmaking. So he invited me, and obviously then I sort of said yes, and I started working with him on a film. And what happens is when you're working on a film, totally consumes you, and there was no time for anything else. But yeah, during that time also, me knowing how to shoot on a DSLR did help me a lot, because I was doing a lot of BTS pictures on the. I also did some publicity stills for the film. So that always kind of, and I mean, after that movie sort of finished, then I was like, okay, this is what I enjoy more, and let me probably now, try and make my own film. So, and yeah, so after that, I sort of started writing and, gave my lot of, like, full spirit was consumed by my own film. So then I went into that. So yeah, so that was, so again, coming back to journey from photography to cinematography, I'll say that they both run simultaneously. There are a lot of cinematographers who are also photographers. There are a lot of photographers who are also cinematographers, because basic principles remain the same.
Okay. But you became
Yeah.
you wanted to be a director, producer, right? Did you have any intention of becoming a cinematographer because you were a photographer before?
No. So if you would have asked me even like when I was in school or even when I was in college, I would have told you that I want to be a writer director. And that's what I want to be. And that is what I want to do. But what happens is through the journey, you have to do a lot of things. You have to learn a lot of things. And I mean, now that I've directed my first film and, I've directed many ads, you have been a part of some of those projects. That's how, for people who are watching, I mean, that's how me and Rajeev met. And, I used to be a director and Rajeev used to work for an agency, and he was my client, and he would used to visit our shoots when we were doing it in Bombay. So I couldn't have become a director if I didn't know photography, and I really think that every director should know as much as possible about photography and cinematography and about how camera works. It's not just helpful, I think it's essential for a director to know. So it was, let's just say, it was one of the skills that I thought I need to acquire before I make my film.
Since you're talking about filmmaking, as a
Hmm.
photographer, I know, like, the different focal lengths, right? Like a 135 and an
Hmm.
85, how the
Correct. Yeah.
compression makes a difference in the images that you make,
Yeah.
using a
Yeah.
50 for street photography versus using a 135 for a portrait, and how flattering it is for the human face.
Yeah.
Okay, it's from a I can understand that from how you can actually project imagery and how you can transform an ordinary looking face or a landscape into something really dramatic, which, it's like night and day in terms of how it looks. How does that transform in terms of filmmaking? Because I'm very interested in how how focal lengths influence storytelling.
So let me say this. There are two ways to look at it. There are two schools there. One school is, which I believe in, it's cinematography is everything. to a story. Okay, the focal length and the lens that you are using for a particular scene versus using another lens will completely change the emotion of the scene, will completely change the scene. So cinematography is everything on a film. I mean, depending on what kind of mood you are trying to set in that scene, based on that, you will choose a lens, a particular lens. So suppose if you put a wide angle lens and you bring that closer to the subject, and that subject delivers a line to the camera, versus you are far away from the subject and you use a telephoto lens and you use the same frame, they will completely have different emotions. When you use a wide angle lens and bring it closer to the subject, there will be a slight distortion in the image. Based on the mood, you can use it to create humor. This technique where you're using a wide angle closer to the subject, you can use it to create humor, or you can use it to make that character look more sinister, because that distortion that it creates on the face does help the mood. Whereas if you're far away from the subject and you're telephoto and you are closer, it will give you a more realistic, more flattish kind of emotion from that person. So I mean, so like that's one example. Now again, putting the camera low on a character versus putting it on eye level, that also completely changes the emotion. Or putting it slightly topish on the character, that completely changes the emotion. Now that goes in photography as well, and as well as it works on the films as well. When you put the camera low, it makes the character look larger than life. So if you have to, so you'll usually see whenever there's an entry of a star in the film, they would usually be like a low angle camera because the character look, bigger in posture. But when it's on the eye level, it sort of gets you right into the character's mind, and you can relate more to the character then. So yeah, so I mean, like, these are the things by which you use different lensing and camera position to create emotion and build the mood of the scene. So yeah, so that is, I mean, as I said, cinematography is very, very important in filmmaking. And the other school is, there are some directors who would say that, okay, it's not that important. That can work based on what kind of a film you are making. There are some directors who think that it's just the actor's emotion and actor's performance that actually, impacts the scene. But I go more with the one where cinematography plays a big role, because I mean, we are in modern world. I mean, so the other school, they are more probably more traditional, and they are more from that theater kind of a school where actors are creating that magic on the stage. It doesn't matter where the camera is. But now I think we have learned so much about cinema. Cinema has come a long way. So the art form, I think, demands that we need to use cinematography as a tool to enhance the story or to tell the story.
Yeah. So like, for
So yeah.
example, there's a recent movie that I saw, I forget the name, where the camera is kind of locked in position and there's no movement. You almost see,
Mm.
you feel like you're peeping into the people's lives, because it's like a window into that action that's happening, right? So I guess
Mm.
it's how you use the technology to assist storytelling.
Absolutely.
How did you get to learn all this? Were there any influences in your life that you learned from other master filmmakers, or was it important to assist other people, in the craft where you picked up these? How does it work?
So obviously there were influences right from childhood. In India, we grew up watching films, but there were certain kind of films that always stood out. And, those were the films that were not very popular. So there was always this argument in my mind that, am I different? Like, why don't people like these kind of films? Now, what I meant, but it's only later I realized that, okay, even these films have a huge fan following. It's just that we were not exposed to those people while we were growing up. What I meant is, there was an entire commercial Bollywood films that, everyone enjoyed. But there was, once a while, there would be a film that you will see, and, so you'll suddenly realize, okay, these kind of films are also there and are also made. So the story, and I mean, I used to love writing stories, stuff like that during my childhood as well. So then when you watch these kind of films, you are like, okay, so, there is a sensibility in the world which might connect with the stories that you are writing. So now I'm talking about films like Ardh Satya. In India, films where Nasiruddin Shah was there, Om Puri was there, Mirch Masala, Jaane Bhi Do Yaro. These were the films that, that were very different from, a mainstream Hindi film. And still they were they were so much better than these films, and so realistic, and people were talking like human beings, and not like some character which is not which who does not exist in our world. So obviously, so there was an inclination towards those films, and obviously later when torrents came, and we had that option of watching whichever film which we want. So then obviously few films that I remember, one was Requiem for a Dream. When I saw that by Darren Aronofsky, when I saw that, I was like, my mind was blown. And I was like, wow, there could be a film like this and somebody can make it. And there could be big actors, in those films. And those films could be a Hollywood blockbusters, but still they would have that edginess and that independent blend of filmmaking. So it was mostly my own research. Like I saw Requiem for a Dream, and thanks to the internet, I could go and Google who's this director, and then I would read up about him. And okay, he was in a film school and he made this film, and okay, before this, he had made 3-4 films. So yeah, so obviously, uh, Darren Aronofsky was somebody that inspired a lot, in the sense that okay, you can think different and make films. Then there was obviously Fight Club, when we saw David Fincher. So that also blew your mind. And then Snatch, then, a lot of these filmmakers, Stanley Kubrick. Obviously, what I'm talking about is this was 10, 12 years ago, when you are young, and, and when you read about these people and you're like, okay, I also want to be like them. So these were the people at least who pushed me to, okay, let's follow your passion, do something. There is a scope of telling deep stories, making films which mean something to the people, not just some futile 3-hour entertainment, which people forget. So yeah, so that time it was these three names that I said. Then in Hindi, obviously it was Anurag Kashyap's era, and he was coming up, and he was this guy who everyone was talking about him. And, there's this writer, he has written Satya, and he's made this film Panch. So he was like, he was always popular amongst the independent film circuit. And, so obviously No Smoking he made. And, when you saw No Smoking, you were like, oh shit, it can also happen in Hindi films. So yeah, so these were some of the people when you are growing up. Then Diwakar Banerjee, obviously, Oye Lucky Lucky Oye and Ghosla Ka Ghosla, they were, those were the films that actually stuck with me. And, and I was happy that, there are people with independent voices who are telling their own stories rather than, doing a manufacturing job in a factory. So yeah, so these were some of the people while growing up. Now, where I was coming up, obviously now when you start working in the industry, you realize that, okay, things are slightly different. It's not as easy as it looked. Stanley Kubrick might have been your hero, but he's coming from a different culture, different kind of family setup. So there is a limitation of this industry. There is a limitation that you have coming from where you are coming without any family background. So you have to work within this structure and within this system. And within that, you will slowly probably find your voice at some point. So I am still trying to find that voice.
What kind of films do you want to make? We've had this discussion many times, and now the emergence of OTT and people's acceptance of different kind of stories, has that opened up avenues for you?
I'll say yes. It has become more open, the industry, and there is a space for newer filmmakers and newer voices and newer stories to come out, and to actually see the light of the day. Because initially it was just theaters, and it was a tough competition, and so it was very, very difficult. Now obviously there is more space for every kind of story. Having said that, what kind of films I want to make? See, I definitely know what are the kind of films I don't want to make. So that is one. What I want to make has to be like, even if one person can there is something that can change in him. I'm not saying I want to make films that revolutionize or, that changes people, but I do feel that films have that power of, at least for people who are watching it, to question their point of view. So any film that even if you that sort of pushes you to debate your own point of view about certain things, or the films which sort of helps your point of view to even take a stronger shape, are good. Any film that can incite a reaction is good. So the films that I want to make, it has to have that kind of a reaction towards certain kind of point of view. I just don't want to make a film for entertainment. I have nothing against it. Films have to be, they have to be entertaining. Even the films that I want to make have to be entertaining. But there has to be something more than that. Only because I feel that it's a power that films have. And when you are making a film, you have the responsibility to sort of use that power, with some kind of a responsibility. So, yeah, so they need to have some depth, some subtext, some in between the lines, because the visuals have the power to change people's minds. So, I'm not saying that it has to create a drastic change or an impact in society, but when people watch it, it has to incite some reaction. So that is something I'm very sure about. Also, what I have learned and I've realized it, if you want to be a unique voice, the stories have to be personal. Like, personal does not mean that it has to be a life story, but it has to stem from something that really, like, in which you have a deep belief in or a strong belief in. So you can create fictional characters, you can create a fictional world, but somewhere there has to be a part of you in the film. Otherwise, it becomes very inorganic and very, there are some films that everything is done right, but you still don't connect with it. I think that is the reason. When you try to artificially do something, which is not very personal to you. So, yeah, so it has to be personal anyway, I think, for a film to work.
Winding down this conversation, let me ask like two last questions. The first, the penultimate question is this: what's happening in the U.S. Hollywood, and the actors and the writers are on strike, right? One of the issues that's on their table is the influence of artificial intelligence and the various apps that have come up. Your Mid Journey and so many generative AIs that have come in. How is it going to affect filmmaking? That's one question that I have. And final question after this that I want to ask you is, looking back, would you still have gotten into filmmaking?
Yeah, okay. So first question, AI, yes. I mean, I use AI. I am a great supporter of any kind of innovation that sort of pushes the boundaries a little bit. So AI will change the filmmaking a lot, in the sense, again, first it will replace the boring jobs. So, let's get that straight. It's not easy for AI yet to sort of write you a screenplay that a writer's room of 4 human beings can write. So it will change the filmmaking. It will going to take over the boring jobs. For example, scheduling of a film. So you put a script onto the AI system and it will create a schedule for you. Rather than 1, 2, 3 persons going through the script, manually breaking them down, thinking, okay, this, which is a job maybe a human mind should not be doing. Human mind should be doing more creative stuff. So it will change filmmaking. It will make things very, very efficient. But as far as, whether it will take away writers' jobs or whether it will take away directors' job, I think it has a long way to go, because ultimately a human being will have to make the decision to whether to make a certain film or not make a certain film, whether to shoot that kind of scene or not, whether to, cast a certain kind of actor in a film or not. I still think that humans will have an upper hand in those decisions. It can help you take a lot of decisions. Okay, so like I am writing one script right now, and I do sit with ChatGPT and wrestle with it. So it's not as easy as, it's using AI is not as easy as people claim that it is. So like you can't just tell ChatGPT, okay, write me a screenplay of a Bollywood film. No, this is not going to work. It will give you some shitty ideas, what it can do is, what it is good at is, like when I'm brainstorming, when I'm thinking about a particular scene, I can discuss with it about it. I can ask him to, okay, in this situation, if a character is in this situation, tell me 5 scenarios will make the scene more interesting. It will give you 5 options. You might like any, you might not like any. It might open up some, thing in your mind and you're like, okay, this is interesting. So it's in a way, what it's doing is it's become a writing assistant. So, this is what probably a writer will do with the 2 of his assistants, and he will use them as a bouncing board to sort of throw an idea at them and they'll get back to you. So it will change filmmaking. It will take over some jobs, but it will take boring jobs. So, and also one thing I do realize is that arts is probably the last industry that AI will replace. There is a lot of work that AI has to do in a lot of other industries before it sort of touches art. Because ultimately, if an AI would have made Oppenheimer, say, it wouldn't have been that interesting. What makes it unique is that there is a person called Christopher Nolan who's making it, whose history we know, whose films we have seen, whom we know. That very interesting fact, I don't know if you know, which I just recently learned about, that, okay, Christopher Nolan has a brother called Jonathan Nolan, who everyone knows, who's written most of his movies, and Dark Knight Rises, Dark Knight is written by Jonathan Nolan. He's also the creator of Westworld. But he also has a third brother, which I didn't know about, who's apparently, he's a, what do you call it? He's somebody who's murdered some people, who's committed homicide,
Oh,
and he's hiding somewhere. Yeah. And and there was an interesting fact I was reading. I might just screw it up. So probably, I don't know if you want to use it, but there was when the third brother of Christopher Nolan, when the police was trying to catch him, they had called that Operation Oppenheimer. First, I thought that it seems too good to be true, this story. And I thought maybe it's just some WhatsApp forward, but it's not actually. It is true. And and when you watch Oppenheimer, and no spoilers there, but you'll see that, there is that personal touch in the film, and the reason why he must have taken that decision to tell this story has to have a personal, something. So what I was coming to is that art is always interesting because there's a human being who has done. Salvador Dali has made a painting is more interesting than, okay, and a Mid Journey has. So yeah, so I think it will change a lot of things, but it will just change for the good and to make it more efficient. Now, second question, whether I would still come into filmmaking? Yes, I will. Absolutely, yes. I just wish I knew a little bit more, because you end up wasting a lot of years and time in just building a network and, trying to hone that skills. And so, just to find your legs in the city like Bombay takes up a lot of time and energy, and you end up doing a lot of work which you shouldn't be doing. So it was a bit inefficient, I'll say. But so, yeah, if I can go back with the current knowledge, I would definitely do things differently and I would be more efficient. But yeah, absolutely. Again,
with that, let's end this conversation. Thanks a lot, Kartik, for joining me on Photo Country.
Thanks a lot, Rajeev, for inviting me again. I hope, this conversation will give something to some people. And yeah, let's do many more of this in the coming weeks.
Awesome. Thank you so much.